Hello and welcome to Daily Records. And today's record is Imagine by John Lennon. This was his second solo album, and it was released on September 9th, 1971 in the United States, and it was released on October 8th, 1971 in the UK. So two different release dates. And like I said, this was his second album, and this was probably one of his most produced efforts. And mine's got this covering, and some of it's kind of peeled off there, so that's what you're seeing on the back there. But this probably was his most commercial album, and when I say that, it was co-produced by Phil Spector, and it's a lot of the material on this album has held up as sort of a greatest hits for John Lennon. Rolling Stone did list it as one of the 500 greatest albums of all time. It was in the top 100. And it's endured. I mean, if you listen to the first Lennon solo album, Plastic Ono Band, that one's really raw and sparse and almost cathartic. This album has John kind of returning a little bit to some of his Beatles roots. And speaking of which, he was in New York, and he'd hooked up with George Harrison, and they had kind of a little bit of a jam session. And so John asked George to come and play on the next album, which he did. The recording was recorded at Ascot Sound Studios, and that was a studio in his home, Tittenhurst, the big white house. And Klaus Vormann, who is a longtime Beatles associate, he had also been around and played bass on this album as well. Now, notably on this album, this was sort of a response to Paul McCartney's Ram album, which had come out. I'm going to go show you the album. There's the inner sleeve with all the credits and lyrics on there. Of course, you see the Apple label, and there's John's face inside the little Apple logo. And there was some bad feelings between John and Paul around this time. Paul had written a couple of songs on Ram that John took issue with. And so this album features the song How Do You Sleep, which is just a direct attack on Paul. And of course later John kind of apologized. He was like, yeah, it was me lashing out. But having said that, this album does feature a lot of well-known John Lennon songs. Of course, there's the title track, the song "Jealous Guy," the ballad, which started out as Mother Nature's Son, not Mother Nature's Son. It started out as Child of Nature. So, I'm getting the songs confused. Mother Nature's Song was a Paul song. Child of Nature, and some of you that are familiar with some of the White Album outtakes and demos, you remember they had a completely different set of lyrics, but Jealous Guy had that sort of the melody, the same melody. And of course, Imagine, going back to that main song, it kind of became his signature song. And John actually said that he regretted not giving Yoko co-writing credit in that, because he felt like she played a large role in writing that song. But it also had songs like rock and roll songs like "Crippled Inside," "It's So Hard," "Give Me Some Truth," which is sort of John being political again, and it kind of goes further back to "Let It Be," but just a great rocking song. Of course, John does get political here. Songs like "I Don't Want to Be a Soldier," and that's just a completely raucous song. And some of you may know the little nice pop little ditty that he wrote for Yoko at the time, "Oh Yoko," which I think was in the film Rushmore, if I'm not mistaken. But the album felt like when it came out, it was well received, and I think it's been enduring. Also, and I remember seeing this back when I was younger in high school, there was a promotional film that came out, about a 90-minute film where John, it showed some of the little promotional clips from the making of the album, of him and Yoko walking around the property at Tittenhurst Park, and of course they also in New York City. And there were a lot of people in the movie. I remember Andy Warhol, Fred Astaire, Jack Palance, Dick Cavett, and of course George Harrison. It was, it was like a big production, just to be sort of a simple thing. But Later on, John expressed some, displeasure because he felt like the album was too commercial, and he just sort of, kind of went against that. And John, in his sort of nature to revise history a little bit, but it is a very pleasant album and probably one of the more digestible of the John Lennon solo catalog. So it's held up very well. Imagine the clouds dripping. Dig a hole in your garden to put them in. Yoko, 1963. That's on the back cover there in small print. But there you go. John Lennon's Imagine, today's Daily Record. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. It's TommyBurton75. I appreciate everyone that watches. Check out my other channel and subscribe to it as well. And in the meantime, I'll see you all again tomorrow with another Daily Record.